It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Well, one of the things I like about the podcast is I never know what I'm going to be covering next, and I like to think that maybe the viewers and listeners feel the same way. You know, a lot of podcasts are singular in their focus, and particularly if you're being paid by someone or something, a lot of times that's what you'll want to do. But I'm not. I'm just covering what I like to cover, and one of the things that I like to cover is aviation safety, and the person that we turn to I really like. It's Captain John Cox, and if you've seen him on the show, Captain Cox is a veteran major airline corporate and general aviation pilot. He's flown over 14,000 hours, over 10,000 in command of jet airliners. Additionally, he's flown as an instructor, a check pilot, a test pilot, and in addition to his extensive involvement in global air safety, he authors the Ask the Captain column for USA Today, which I never miss. And he also serves as the aviation analyst for NBC News and provides expertise to numerous other media outlets around the world, really. He also frequently appears as an expert on the television programs Air Disasters, Why Planes Crash, and I'm just addicted to those things. I also think of him as the man from Missouri, and at some point we're going to talk to him, not today, but his early aviation career was centered here in the heartland, basically, and in the state of Iowa, I believe, but we'll get to that on another show. Let's welcome him on in. Captain John Cox, welcome back to Podcast by George.
Thank you, George. It's good to be here.
Well, we've got a specific topic today to talk about, and it was one of these things that just makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It's Transair Flight 810, Boeing 737-200 cargo jet. It crashed shortly after departing Honolulu in the wee hours of the morning, Friday, July 2nd. I want you to set the stage for us here a little bit, but maybe first off, just talking about this aircraft, which I'm going to guess you're well acquainted with.
737s and I have spent a lot of time together. I flew that airplane for about 8,000 hours and started on the 737-200. So I've spent a lot of time with that particular model of the 737.
Now, this is a cargo jet. Was it converted from a commercial passenger jet, or was this always a cargo plane that they were flying?
It came from Canada, and I believe that it flew passengers up there and then was converted into a freighter some years ago, and then it's been in Hawaii for a number of years.
And they're flying out of Honolulu, flying cargo after midnight. I wanted to start maybe by having you talk about every pilot, I would imagine, would like to fly on a clear, sunny day. You don't always get to do that, obviously. Flying at night can be rather routine. But how routine is it? Is it something that, you're a little more cautious about, or just with instruments and all that, it's just another day, it just happens to be night?
It really, it's just another night at the office. Professional pilots, we fly in all weather and day, night. It just depends on what the schedule is. You don't really think that much about it. There are limitations, obviously, to visibility and things like that at night, but it tends to be smoother. So in some ways, it's more comfortable. So it's not something that causes any apprehension.
Well, I've got something to share with our viewers and with our listeners. I've got the actual air traffic control audio with these pilots. Again, beginning right after they took off from the airport. So I'm going to play some of that and might stop it and jump in here. And anytime that you want to stop and comment here, Captain, do so. Now, I've edited this for length because there are some pauses and there was some other air traffic control conversation in here that we didn't want to listen to. But let's play this and see how it goes here.
Rose, 810 will have emergency standby. Going on the 220 heading.
Rose Express 810, radar contact, fly heading of 100 to John Victor 2, resume navigation.
820 has emergency, going to 220 heading, standby.
That's the first indication of a problem.
Yeah, and that term is not used lightly, I would imagine. If someone says the words emergency, that air traffic controller is going to snap to immediately, and we've got an issue here, correct?
Yeah, and it was standby, which says that they're trying to identify what's happening, and then determine a course of action.
Okay, here we go.
Express 810, radar contact, turn left, heading.
Rose 810, radio check, how do you read?
Rose Express 810, loud and clear. How do you hear? Turn left, heading 180.
Okay, Rose 810, we've lost an engine. We are on the 220 heading.
Okay, I should mention that when that's muddled like that, it's because they're talking over one another, as I understand it, a lot of times. So that's why we're hearing that. Okay, we've talked about this on an earlier podcast with you, Captain. This guy's saying he's lost an engine. Now, that's serious. Don't get me wrong, but it isn't the end, obviously. You can lose an engine and still fly on, correct?
The 737 flies very well on one engine, and it is something that pilots train a lot. Every time you're in the simulator, you're going to have engine failures, and you're required to deal with it both from a checklist standpoint, but also from hand flying the airplane, keeping it under control, coming up with a plan of action, and then executing that to get it back safely on the runway.
All right, we're going to continue to play this. And one thing I want my listeners to pay particular attention to, I was really struck by the cool and calm demeanor of the air traffic controller, but also the pilots, because my God, I can't imagine what they're dealing with up there and what they must be thinking. I know this isn't your first time hearing this, and I'm thinking that probably you're not all that surprised by this. You would expect kind of this approach.
Absolutely. With professional pilots, we train under a lot of strain and stress deliberately, so that if you do have an emergency in flight, that you're prepared to handle it.
All right, let's let this roll.
Alley, say again, heading 240.
Okay, 240 heading Rose 810.
Rose Express 810, you're cleared visual approach runway 4 right. You can turn in towards the airport.
Okay, Rose 810, we're going to have to run a checklist if we can get a delay vector.
Heading, and just keep me advised and maintain 2,000 if that's the altitude you'd like.
Okay, and I got really worried. Folks, I'm telling you, these things get to me. When I listen to this 2,000 feet, man, they haven't got much room to spare. That's not much altitude, Captain.
But it's sufficient. It's about what you're going to want to turn, what they call on the final approach, which is aligning with the runway. And you want to do that from probably 5 to 7 miles out. 1,500 to 2,000 feet would be about normal. But it's also, they're not that concerned about their safety at that moment, because he says, we need to run some checklists, which is the right thing to do. Because where you can get in the most trouble is rushing into something and then something gets overlooked or doesn't get completed properly. So the thing that you want to do is the engine failure checklist and run it down through the approach phase, and then get the airplane configured, slowed down, the slats and flaps in their proper position, the landing gear down, and then finalize the landing portion of the engine failure checklist. And then you're prepared to land the airplane. But there's some radios that have got to be tuned up and things like that. Now, this crew flies in and out of Honolulu every night. So this is a familiar airport they know the frequencies for the ground-based radio navigation that they're going to need. So they can do a lot of this in their head pretty quickly. But I was pleased to hear that we need to run some checklists, because procedurally, that's what they should do.
Yeah, just listening to you, I can hear you rattle through these things in your mind's eye because of your experience and knowledge. They have experience and knowledge also. They could probably do the same thing, but you want to rely on a checklist because this is not your ordinary situation, obviously. Do you know anything about the weather? Was it cloudy? Was it moonlit? Could they see the water? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know. I was asked about whether there was a moonlit or not, and I never did get an answer to that. I believe the weather was visual, because you hear the controller say cleared for the visual, which means that she expected them to be able to see the airport. And the weather in Honolulu is typically pretty good.
And just looking into this, moonlight, you think, well, okay, moonlight's not very bright. That doesn't make any difference. It can make a big difference, right?
Oh, it definitely can. Where they're going to end up in the water, it will really help with depth perception. If they're going to land on the runway, it's less critical because of the lighting around the runway. Plus, they have both lateral and vertical electronic guidance in the cockpit, and they don't know that they're going in the water yet.
Right.
So it would have helped them a lot if there was some additional lighting.
All right, let's let this roll on.
Okay, 2000 is good for now. We'll stay around 15 miles from the airport and maintaining 2000.
And Rose Express 810, when you get a chance, can I get, the nature of the emergency? I know you said an engine out. Which one? How many souls on board and fuel?
Okay, all that is good. We'll give you all that in a little bit, Rose 810.
Okay, so he's plenty busy, and you can tell. And again, the hair stands up on the back of my neck whenever they say that fuel and souls on board. Did you ever have to give that information as a pilot? Were you ever in a critical situation like that?
Yeah, I've had to declare emergency, not a lot, but several times in the course of flying, and that's a required set of questions from the air traffic controller, and it's trying to let emergency services know what to expect when you get to the airport, and also how much time do you have? In other words, before you get to be fuel critical. So it's information that helps the controller do their job, and the emergency services crew do theirs.
Okay, here we go.
You're ready.
The controller's handling this really well because she's not pressing them for that information.
Rose Express 810, hello, Tara.
Yeah, we can take the 10 to the right towards the airport. We're not ready to land yet, though.
Rose Express 810, fly heading of 250.
250.
Now they're ready to go back to the airport. They've gotten the checklist items out of the way. They've had a brief discussion on where they want to put the jet, and now they're ready to turn back toward the airport. This is all being handled the way that it should be. And and I don't know which pilot it is, but the pilot working the radio, they sound like they're on top of it. They don't sound as though they're rushed or anything else. It sounds good at this point.
Yeah, I'm just amazed at how cool, calm, and collected they are. I can only put myself in their situation. I would probably sound like an hysterical girl. But this guy, yeah, I mean, these guys are really cool. So here we go.
To come to the airport now.
Rose Express 810, Roger. Confirm you still have the airport in sight. Turn right.
Negative.
020.
Now here's one of these
Rose
pauses.
Express 810, turn right, heading 020. Confirm you still have the airport in sight.
Negative, we don't have the airport. Rose 810, 020.
Rose Express 810, fly heading of 020. And would you like to intercept the localizer, or do you want vectors?
Vectors straight to the airport. We might land the other
Turn right, heading 040.
Give me, say again, Rose 810.
040, heading Rose Express 810.
Okay, so I think this may come up again, but you can explain this, and I always wonder about this. Explain briefly what an ILS intercept is for a landing, and what vectors are, and what straight into the airport is.
The runway has on it that's transmitting a radio signal that's both vertical and horizontal, and you hear the reference to the localizer. That's the lateral left-right indication of where the runway center line is. And it displays in the flight deck. The vertical portion of it is called the glide slope, and she gives them a 020 heading to intercept the localizer, and they actually said, no, we want to go straight to the airport. This is an indication that something more is happening here, because the normal approach would be to intercept the localizer, align with the runway, and then fly into the glide slope and then start your descent. That would be the normal procedure. I want to go straight to the airport is saying that we're having an increasing difficulty or additional problem.
And she knows that.
She would have been surprised for the straight to the airport, but she absolutely, you want to go straight to the airport, fly heading 040. she's providing them very good service.
Good. Here we go.
040, Roger, Rose 810.
And Rose Express 810, is it 2 souls on board, and also how much fuel remaining?
Rose 810, standby.
810, fly heading to 050.
050, Rose Express 810.
That's the other pilot.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Okay, Rose 810, situation with loss number 1, an engine. And we're coming straight to the airport. We're going to need the fire department. There's a chance we're going to lose the other engine too. It's running very hot. And speed is, we're pretty low on the speed. Doesn't look good out here. You might want to let the fuel gun know as well.
Okay, to my ear, that's all bad, man. I mean, he's got one engine out. He's got one that's going to overheat.
That's really unusual.
Yeah,
that's really unusual. This is an engine that has been around since the 60s, and it's an extremely reliable, robust engine. It's one of the most widely used engine types in the 737s, DC-9, 727s. There's literally thousands of these engines out there. To have 2 engines like this, something here is really fundamentally wrong. And this type of engine is not prone to overheating. So this is something the investigators are going to have to resolve, because this is very, very unusual. It's also very concerning, and you can hear it in his voice. He's beginning to get a little bit concerned.
And he made his first mention of the Coast Guard, which would mean we ain't going to make it. We're going to end up in the water. And, growing up on Hollywood and modern culture, we think about water landings and ditchings at sea. And, of course, Sully Sullenberg had that miraculous landing on the Hudson. But I don't know, Captain. I've always told folks that was a miracle. I mean, that for Sully, it was the middle of a bright sunny day again, and it was on a river that was flat and calm. But a water landing ain't easy, and I think probably the majority of the time it does not end well.
Well, there have been a very few cases where airliners have been ditched into the water. There was a DC-9 that was off of San Juan, Puerto Rico, a number of years back.
Yeah.
That they exhausted all the fuel in the airplane, and they successfully ditched it. There were some fatalities, but the vast majority of people got out of it. Sullenberger's landing in the Hudson, everybody, all 153 people got off the airplane safely. And there was a 767, but it was in the middle of a hijack. And that did not turn out well. But all in all, it's just not something that pilots have to really deal with very often. We're trained for it, and there is procedures in the book. But if you heard, he said, we're going to need the fire equipment. That's normal. That's absolutely normal. When he said you might activate the Coast Guard, that's not normal. That says that in their minds, there's a chance now they won't make the airport. And that's a serious condition.
Let's roll on. We got a couple of minutes left here for this.
And we don't have any hazmat. And fuel is about 2 hours of fuel.
And Rose Express 810, how many people are on board?
2 of us.
Rose Express 810, Roger. Do you have the airport in sight? Rose Express 810, do you have the airport in sight?
Negative.
Oh, and Rose Express 810, low altitude alert. Low altitude alert. Are you able to climb at all?
No, negative.
Yeah.
They're going in the water.
Yeah,
That's the other pilot, probably the captain. And that's the low altitude alert. This is a little bit unusual. They don't tell the controller that they're out of 2,000 feet. She sees it on the radar and says low altitude alert. And that's a perfect call from her, because she's warning them, hey, you're getting close to the ground or the water. And then the voices change, and we're not going to make the airport. That's the first time that you hear that, and it's the other voice. So they know that they've got a really serious situation here.
This stuff, this true to life stuff, it makes me weepy. I mean, it makes my eyes water when I listen to this. I mean, You've got the Hollywood depictions, and then you've got this real life stuff. And I mean, everybody's got to die, folks. I mean, we never get out of this alive, but very seldom do you see it coming at you like this and have time
I
to
wouldn't.
deal with it.
I would expect them. I would expect for them to pull this off.
Yeah,
I would expect for them to be successful in that.
great.
They've got the airplane slowed down, and it's under control. So it's going to be a difficult landing, but it's one that I would expect survival out of.
Talk about that checklist and the prep for this. Now, is there a particular checklist for a water ditch or a landing? Some things that they have to do? Anything that would actually improve their likelihood of surviving this?
There is a ditching checklist, and it's things like there's some valves on the outside of the airplane that you want to close to slow the water coming into the airplane so that the airplane will float longer. There's some things like that. There's a reminder to try to land parallel with the swells, but it's at night. And one of the things is they may not be able to see which direction the swells are going. And you want to go parallel with it so that you don't hit that swell with the airplane. As soon as the engines go into the water, they're going to have a tendency to pitch the airplane nose down. And that's something that you want to try to avoid. So you want to keep the nose as high as you can, as long as you can, and kind of let the back half of the airplane touch the water surface first. But that requires being able to see exactly where the water is and managing the energy, because they don't have any thrust now. Both engines are out. So they've got to use the kinetic energy in the airplane to get the lift they need to minimize the impact forces at touchdown.
Okay, we're coming close to the end here. One thing that I know that's coming up, there was another airport that was off to their left that was closer than where they came from, and they even considered that. But of course, it didn't happen for them. But that's what we're going to hear next, I think. Let's let this roll.
Road Express 810, Roger. Proceed direct to the airport, and you are cleared to land any runway.
We need a heading.
Road Express 810, heading 060.
060.
That's the Capt. Oh, that's the other pilot. That's
Yeah.
the Capt.
Road Express 810, the trucks are rolling.
The fire trucks.
You want to let the Coast Guard know as well?
Say that again?
Can you let the Coast Guard know? We can maintain altitude.
We will. Road Express 810, the Coast Guard is on their way.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And Road Express 810, if you want to land 8 right, if you can get to the runway, any runway, you are clear to land. Road Express 810, if you can get to runway 8 right or Kalaeloa, do you want Kalaeloa?
I'd like the closest airport runway, please.
Kalaeloa Airport is 3 miles north of you, off your 9 to 10 o'clock. Can you get that, Road Express 810? It's 3 to your left, about 3 miles northwest of you.
Okay, give me a heading.
Road Express 810, the airport is about a 310 heading from you.
310, thank you.
Road Express 810, the lights may need to be on 132.6. They may be pilot controlled. Road Express 810.
Go ahead.
What she's saying there is the other airport that they're talking about, the runway lights may not be on. And there's a way that you can activate those as a pilot, but you have to come up on a specific radio frequency and key your microphone several times. That's a lot to ask them to do right now. They don't have much time, and they're not able to climb. So that in my mind would tell me I'm not going to go there because I got too much to do and too little time in which to do it.
And what's causing them now? The engines go out. Did they just not have enough altitude to begin with, and not enough glide to make that original airport, or is something else happened that's bringing them down?
It's hard to say. We don't know what the configuration of the airplane is, meaning the leading edge slats and flaps. They should be extended for a single engine landing, but that is going to shorten their glide capability because it creates more drag. We don't know whether the landing gear is up or down. If it is down, then that's going to create more drag and reduce their ability to glide. You don't expect to be in a glider. You expect to have one engine operating and return for a single engine landing. So that's the way, and initially that's what they were setting up. But you can hear in everybody's voice, the first officer, the captain, and the controller, this has elevated itself to a whole new level, and everybody now recognizes that this is a full-blown emergency. It's a serious situation.
All right, let's take this. I think this will run to the end here. Here we go.
Roads Express 810, Honolulu Tower. Chief 2, Honolulu Tower.
I was trying to call you on ground. Is ground out?
No, I was kind of busy.
Understand. Do you have a status update on this aircraft?
Who's that, Captain? That's a ground guy. What is that?
I don't really know. It sounds like it may be another controller or something. There was talk about it may be that they've switched frequencies. I don't know, because it almost sounded like they said Honolulu Tower, where they were talking to the radar controller. So it's a little hard to determine exactly who and what that was.
Okay, because this guy wants to know what the status of that flight is, and I was thinking maybe
It could be the ground emergency.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Commander. That's also possible.
Okay.
Chief 2, yeah, it looks like they went down in the water about 2 miles southeast of Kalaeloa.
Understand. 2 miles southeast of Kalaeloa.
That's a ground commander.
Yeah, and that's the end of the audio that I have. Okay, so let's leave it there. The audio, that is. Now, miraculously, the plane landed, such as a landing on water is, in the dark like that, in the ocean. One pilot, I think, is in pretty good shape. The other one, maybe not.
One of them, I think, was listed in critical condition in the hospital in Honolulu, and the Coast Guard picked both of them up, and they were one of them had suffered, was very exhausted, fatigue and kind of thing. And then the other one was in better shape, but one of them's pretty badly banged up.
And I was kind of surprised to find out in the aftermath here that they haven't gotten the recorders yet. Maybe that's just SOP. I thought those things, knowing exactly where they went down, they just, drop some divers down or a diving bell or something and go pull these things out of the ocean. But maybe it's real deep there, or it's just going to take some time. Well,
the National Transportation Safety Board has a team of investigators in Honolulu, and they are directing the investigation and recovery. So as of this morning, they're talking about wanting to do a site sonar scan to make sure that they understand where the wreckage is, and then determine whether the wreckage is at a depth that divers can get to it, or whether they're going to have to go with remote vehicles or something like that to try to recover both the digital flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder.
Not that I care much about the cargo, but you know what it was? I mean, it's all at the bottom of the ocean, right?
Yeah, I really don't know. They had a big mail contract, but the post office says there was no U.S. mail on the flight. But whatever else they were carrying, I don't know.
Well, we've run a little longer than I normally do, but I just find this stuff fascinating and hair-raising, obviously. We want to thank the captain for explaining all of this to us. Now, and I know in your role as a safety analyst and with your company and your media, you've analyzed, dozens, maybe hundreds of crashes. What in particular has already interested you about this one specifically?
I think the investigators, they're going to look at what is common to both engines. A maintenance procedure that was done on both engines on the previous during the previous day or last time it was in for maintenance. The fuel, could it be a contamination in the fuel? They say they have 2 hours worth of fuel on board. That's about probably 12,000 pounds, something like that. So they indicate that they do have fuel on board. So fuel exhaustion would not be likely. But they're going to be looking for commonality between the two engines, because it's extraordinarily unusual to have two engines fail back to back like this.
And again, we talked about this on the earlier show. We might get a preliminary report here in a couple of weeks and then wait for a final report as much as a year away. Is that kind of the standard way this goes?
I think we'll probably see a preliminary within 30 days or so, and then probably 18 months or so for the final. Once they find the common link between these two engine failures, this is the sort of investigation that would go pretty quickly. The crew was properly licensed and trained. The airplane was properly maintained and was airworthy when it flew its flight. Those sorts of things. The weather was not a factor. Those sorts of things go pretty quickly in the investigative process. Now, if they found a maintenance process that was common, change of oil, something like that, and they then realized that was the linkage, then they're going to concentrate there to understand how that happened.
All right. He's a busy guy, folks. We got to let him go. Captain, thanks again for coming on a podcast by George.
My pleasure, George. Always good to see you.
Yeah, and that's Captain John Cox, really the safety expert that you'll see everywhere on NBC and Podcast by George, I guess. Really delighted to have him on the show. And folks, if you like Podcast by George, please, like us on Facebook and then on YouTube. It's really important that you not only watch the videos, but subscribe, give us a thumbs up. And also subscribe on iTunes and leave us a comment there. That always helps. But folks, that's going to wrap it up for now. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.